Hey, I'm Bree, and today I'm going to explore with you in a multi-part series as to why Netflix was always going to acquire Warner Brothers, how the signs were there and most of the media missed them, why David Ellison was never the front runner, and where we're likely to see Netflix and Warner's go in the future. Just a little bit about myself. Not only am I a lifelong fan of film, I'm also studying the industry for many, many years. I'm a seasoned professional in behavior analysis and pattern recognition. And these are not separate identities for me. I've used to apply to human behavior, markets, media situations, and have used all of that in my own family office, which holds an institutional size position in Netflix and a sizable position in Warner Brothers Discovery. Why it is extremely important that people look beyond the headlines and the propaganda that is being spread about Netflix, as well as the Ellisons, and really focus on what is going on and why this deal is likely the best outcome for the industry, how it's already been in the works for quite some time, and why we need this to happen versus a deal with Paramount. But first, I'd like to start with why Netflix was always the front runner in this, how they've been planning for quite some time to at least acquire Warner assets and make a pivot into IP, expanding their library beyond just in-house productions. Okay, let's dive in. So as an investor, I really started to notice a change in the beginning of 2025 in the direction that Netflix was heading. So we saw them hosting the SAG Awards and showing a very support for not only the actors, but just interesting things like Sarandos appearing on a competitor's platform with the studio and showing that he had a sense of humor about it. But it's also serendipitous because here he is, appearing in a show that's about one of the last standing movie studios. And there he is appearing in this. We'll dive into later how Succession played out in real life with the Ellisons and how they want to be the Roy family. But we're going to specifically focus on Netflix and their actions and how this isn't just a fly-by-night decision, despite people saying, it's an outmoded idea for Netflix and they hate theatricals, yada, yada. And they're just kicking the tires. I don't know how many times I've read those headlines and just wanted to scream. And I don't know if Wall Street just doesn't get it because they've never really understood the film industry. I don't think they can. They don't understand how, even if you go back to the studio wars of the golden age of cinema, they just don't get it. So it can take a while before they see the vision. And, by then it's already been executed and it's been done really well, or it hasn't been done well. And, they've missed the mark on that too. But what's really been surprising is how little insider knowledge the people who are so-called media experts, even through some of my favorite journals that cover the entertainment industry, and especially some of the more prominent podcasters, have really, really missed the mark on this and provided quote unquote expert analysis that has just not been accurate and doesn't really take in Netflix seriously throughout this process. And they have been very, very serious. And I think those of us who have been long-term investors in Netflix and know their story and even know the industry but still have a really good understanding of the market could see the signs there. So first of all, we had the SAG Awards. We had also their partnership with India, which is really important. India is a major consumer of not only, Bollywood, but entertainment and films in general. So by partnering or announcing a Bollywood theme content slate, they've cozied up not only to India, but are creating a footprint there that is extremely important because that is a very untapped market. Netflix has been making a point to ensure that they're creating international content. So like when I was in Hungary, I had Hungarian content there. There's series being made in Austria, Danish series, all through global travels. And when I've been in those places and accessed my Netflix account, I've been able to see their content and how they've tailored and made things for that part of the world, which is really fascinating and something that I don't think their counterparts are doing. June, we see things really shift to obvious as to where they're headed. And not just global reach, but that they're making moves that show that they're about to at least acquire assets for Warner, if not the company and HBO streaming. So we have them again moving forward with India. They make a deal with Ekta Kapoor's Balaji Telefilms to produce original Indian films and series. And then, and this is what I think is really big, in France, they announced their TF1 distribution deal. And this may have gone under the radar, but it's a first of its kind carriage deal that allows them to integrate with third-party channels, which is a very studio-like move, satisfying local content and regulatory obligations, which is the kind of behavior you would want to engage in if you're looking to prepare for antitrust scrutiny. This is very important. In June, Netflix, I don't even think themselves predicted what was about to happen with K-pop Demon Hunters. But I mean, it really was a pivotal moment for the company because not only did this become the most watched animated film ever for Netflix, it's the most watched movie they've had of all time with hundreds of millions of views. Then the soundtrack is breaking global records. You know, we have Golden being performed at the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. It goes platinum on, announced on Jimmy Fallon and being nominated for Grammys, for, potentially for Oscars, Critics' Choice Awards. And they really get to see how much valuable IP can be in terms of, competing with the likes of Disney and Frozen. And they could go in the future with that kind of meaningful IP. And I think they've known that in what they've chosen to license, and they've been very smart about it. I think they saw the success they had with Korean material in general with things like Squid Games. But even then, they decided to do something they really hadn't, I don't think, ever done before, and pivot to doing a theatrical release for this in the summer. So we see them, bringing it back to theaters in August, not just as an award qualifier, but as a sing-along, and giving fans what they want and recognizing that, theatricals can be done. I don't know that they're going to be done in the way that everybody's saying. I do think they are willing to pivot, and what's being widely misquoted is what Sarandon said about theaters. I mean, I think it's going to be on his tombstone based on the number of articles that traditional theaters are an outmoded idea. But let's look at what he is saying and what he's not saying has become outmoded. And I think what we're looking at is more of a strategic pivot to how we're going to use theaters, and partnerships were announced later this year, and we're going to discuss that. Netflix pivot into doing theatricals, and a lot of speculation as to whether they'll continue to do them past their deadlines or their existing agreements with Warner. But I think they will. I think it's just going to look different. So in June, we have Warner, who strategically announces that they're going to do a split from their Discovery assets, which is your legacy media that is not doing as well, from the Warner Brother studios and streaming assets, which are doing quite well, and stating that they were never meant to really compete with Netflix, but to complement. I think that's key. That was one of the things that was said on, don't remember which one of Warner's earnings calls, but it's been mentioned. Also on Netflix earnings call, they specifically are mentioning how their competition is YouTube. That was not to get investors disillusioned, which did hurt the stock this summer. But I think it was, again, to remind from an antitrust perspective that we are competing with YouTube. We're not the dominant streamer, which is true. And there's TikTok and all of the verticals. And I think it was important for shareholders to know that, even though Wall Street may not have been able to read between the lines, we're not dominating everything. So we do need Warner, and we are going to make that happen. And we can make our own original content So then we have HBO. They're announcing their own split. Okay, yeah, that's what we need. Netflix is looking for global IP dominance, producing content, a lot of talent moving over there, and Netflix continuing to just make their content. Maybe they're not doing the theatricals or the length of time that people want. They're also not compromising on the talent. So late summer, we've got the K-pop inflection, theatrical power. We have a sing-along version of K-pop hit U.S. theaters. They grossed $19.2 million just in one weekend, which outperformed Netflix theatrical high with Glass Onion. And then in summer, we're seeing them gear up for awards, for Emmys. Adolescents received multiple nominations, won, I believe, in almost every category that it was nominated for, similar to previous years with Baby Reindeer and Beef. They've really done well in the limited series category. And then we see commitment towards theatricals. We know that Narnia is going to be coming next year for Thanksgiving in IMAX. We have Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein, which is highly anticipated. We have all of the festivals and awards circuits where we have movies like Jay Kelly, House of Dynamite, Train Dreams, Perfect Neighbor, all of these very strong award level films showing their commitment to make quality. And I'm not saying everything that Netflix makes is high quality, but there was a lot of what I believe to be some of the most solid films of this year. And Warner, of course, created some of the most fabulous films this year, one battle after another, Sinners. And I really see the synergy there. If you look at the Critics' Choice Awards, you can see, Netflix and HBO, Warner just neck and neck, like in terms of nominations, showing that there's style and synergy. There's synergy between the types of shows that are being at Warner and HBO, and then what you're seeing over at Netflix. So there's like this weird little thing that did make some headlines and started people finally talking a little bit about with Zaslav Sarandos appearing at the Canelo Crawford fight. So this is Emmy weekend, has Sarandos and David Zaslav photographs sitting together, and that multiple outlets noted this, explicitly connecting rumors maybe Netflix is desiring Warner, but those were pretty quickly dismissed because David Ellison absolutely starts having a fit, getting Elon Musk to try to call and cancel Netflix. And I mean, throwing out all of his tantrums and bids for Warner publicly, which shakes things up and I think expedites Netflix timeline. To me, stock didn't split in the summer. It was likely going to split at the beginning of the year to make things more accessible to buy a stock purchase or at least an asset purchase. When Warner was originally going to split the beginning of 2026, mid 26, that would have been when we were more likely to see an acquisition. But from my perspective, and someone who has been long Netflix and then also holding Warner, it's obvious at this time Netflix is going to be moving forward with Warner. And this is not just a thesis, it goes to credibility. And I start talking to other people, a lot of them saying it's valid research in Europe, looking at what's going on in South Korea, moves, Netflix houses, those kind of things, and how that IP is going to integrate. And I just think the signs are there, as well as other projects that get cut due to need for obvious funding sources if you're going to create a deal like this. So in October, stupid headlines like, oh, Netflix is just kicking the tires and it's going to go to Amazon, it's going to go to Apple. And then we have this ridiculous Elon Musk. And he's been a thorn in my side for a lot of years, back from when we used to hold Tesla and sold it for a number of reasons. But he starts with this ridiculous campaign of cancel Netflix for the health of your kids. Now, this is someone who is not really the moral police. He's not even agreeing to abide with the new rules in Australia about social media and accounts below the age of 16. Clearly doesn't seem to have this priority or the health of children. Starts telling everybody to cancel Netflix based upon the show Paranormal that had been canceled by Netflix a long time ago. And the timing is really sus because it's like, why now is he jumping on the bandwagon? Well, you may not know this. And when we get to the Ellison episode, Elon Musk and the Ellison family go way back. Larry Ellison was one of his mentors. He owns a ton of Tesla stock, and they did similar hostile moves and collusion when they decided to take Twitter private, and they all had to pull together to do that and conglomerate. This guy was going to finance his son's deal when he's sending letters calling Warner a dumpster fire and saying that he's going to buy it at X amount of share, making Warner's stock go up, interrupting their split, which is where we heard about all the unsolicited bids. That was not Netflix. That was Paramount. They wanted nothing to do with them. There's no synergy. They're laying off jobs. They're firing all the women at the company. And here is Elon Musk telling everybody, cancel Netflix and bringing down the share price, which is just extremely aggravating. It's wrong. And he's doing it right before their earnings. And it's really interesting, too, because Netflix allowed them to be exempt from the password sharing for Tesla vehicles, and they have a commercial integration with Netflix content in their vehicles. And usually those kind of agreements would come with some kind of a non-disparagement clause, or Netflix is in your vehicles and you're literally telling people to cancel their platform. There's a conflict. And I remember reaching out to saying, hey, is this even legal? And does Netflix not have a case here for some kind of non-disparagement clause. And I don't know if a C&D was ever sent, but Elon Musk does kind of back off. But it's extremely interesting that here he is running around telling everybody to cancel the platform, that his friend wants to buy Warner. I did post about this repeatedly, letting people know this is not just him all of a sudden getting moral conscience about children. He has an agenda here in canceling Netflix, bringing down their stock price, as well as placating the Ellisons who helped him with the Twitter deal, their desire to own all of the media between TikTok and Paramount and X and everything else, make them out as anti-family because they're inclusive. So I flagged this immediately. He's just trying to poison the brand to turn middle America against Netflix and to rile both sides, given that they're working towards this deal with Warner and the Ellisons won it and they're not going to play nice. Netflix rises above it. They don't keep going. And in October, they announced an interesting partnership with the Italy's Centro Sperimentale di Cinematografia. I probably butchered that. To reopen Rome's historic Cinema Europea, which is a working theater and training space. This is more than just a romantic gesture and nostalgia. It says we're going to honor cinema history. We're not destroyers. Italy is very important to European film. If you've ever had the chance to go to Turin, there's an amazing place to go. It's called the National Museum of Cinema. It's absolutely amazing for cinephiles. It's truly an outstanding experience. Italy as a culture is very interested in preservation and tradition. And I think this was key to showing you regulators that we're going to uphold film tradition and not tear it down. So then you have an earnings call coming and Elon Musk has already done damage. Paramount is making all the headlines that they're going to take over Warner, and Warner is having to deal with back and forth between Zaslav, and he's making it clear, hey, we're rejecting this bid. It's worth a lot more. Ellison and really trying to interfere, do a hostile takeover instead of just building his own stuff. Like it or not, Netflix is going to be the best option when we're looking at Warner and this acquisition, and not just from a shareholder perspective, but also just in the realm of to stakeholders and what they want to see to make this happen. And they may not be doing everything perfect the way you want. I have a big love and huge concern for the Turner Classic Movie Library and what's going to happen with that. I wish that it would just be given to Criterion. I think that's where it belongs. But I believe Netflix is going to do right by it and not just write it off or leading things the way that we're seeing some of the other studios do. But regardless, I digress. The Brazilian tax matter. So Q3 earnings, stock starts going down. Wall Street is in uproar. Where did the $619 million Brazilian tax dispute? It's being taken off now. I don't know that that was intentional, but I do think it was necessary. You're not going to walk into a $70 billion acquisition process with an unresolved 9-figure sovereign tax problem on your balance sheet. It just doesn't make logical sense. So at that time, I had said, why would they do that? I don't believe it's just, oh, well, we had to do this tax matter. Well, if you're looking to clean the books ahead of time in terms of financing, or you're going to be offering stock, you want to make sure that everything is clean, which is part of due diligence. Other notable things is that around that time, Netflix had $1.3 billion in US ad revenue applied for 2024. YouTube is still being mentioned as major competitor, which is important because it matters in terms of showing they're not the dominant streamer. And I've seen things like they're the first and the third, which that's not true. We have YouTube, which is definitely the dominant one, Netflix, followed by Disney, Hulu, Amazon, and then HBO. We're really not in antitrust territory in terms of them merging with HBO, especially when you look at HBO's footprint in international markets. There's some licensing to Sky, but they don't have a footprint there, which makes it a lot easier to digest. But it just strengthens Netflix's case that they can digest and monetize a larger studio catalog, and they're going to be on good footing with the Brazilian government, South America. So this is really interesting. In late October of 2025, we have AMC and Netflix, not AMC Studios, because they've always had a pretty good relationship with Netflix, but AMC Entertainment and the movie theaters bury the hatchet, and Variety reports finally burying the hatchet and booking K-pop Demon Hunters in the venues for Halloween weekend. And then later that they're going to be doing Stranger Things in a theatrical release. And interestingly, on AMC's Q3 earnings call we listened to, They're stating they're entering into new dialogue with Netflix to allow showings of K-pop Demon Hunters, the Stranger Things, and that they are looking forward to strategic partnerships in the future. They're looking forward to working together. I think we're looking at more live events with AMC, launch parties, that kind of thing, and theatrical windows, but more experiences that will go with Netflix experience houses in an effort to save cinema with the realization that people just aren't going to the theater the way that they used to, and perhaps restoring a level that is more appreciative. But maybe the theatrical windows aren't as long, but more people are going. Netflix is proving we are willing to work with theaters, but it just needs to make sense. And why would you kill theatricals and make a partnership with AMC if you weren't going to buy Warner and your goal is just to do streaming? Netflix is just kicking the tires, and then once they actually are winning the bid, we start seeing their token politicians coming forward saying, oh, we have concerns. If anybody else gets it besides us, Trump is going to cancel that deal. When we do the Ellison episode, I'm going to explain why I don't think that's the case at all, and why I think that they're in a much better footing than people realize. It's also, just on a quick side note, it's very important to note Netflix is creating jobs, not cutting them. Also, interestingly, they purchased location in Washington, D.C. for the purpose of hosting events and meetings, which was done well before it was announced in October that they were going to enter into a bid, and hired this firm to help assist with the process of acquisition. Very strategic for lobbying. So just to recap, the auction in Netflix was, quote, never serious myth. Paramount Sky has submitted multiple offers, but with serious concerns about leverage and financing capacity. Comcast was in the mix throughout the process, but this was considered risky. There's been the consistent mainstream commentary. Netflix is just kicking the tires. They're builders, not buyers. Ted Sarandos doesn't do theatricals, but just not the actions of Netflix and what we're really seeing. And I was so happy when I heard the earnings or the investor relations call yesterday, 5 a.m., when they were fully discussing what is happening, what's been said, and their plans for the future, and why they want to do this, and why it makes strategic sense, and where they're headed, and how they really don't think it's going to be the headache or the impossible task that everyone thinks. And I don't either. As a shareholder of both, I can tell you right now, Paramount is not what is best for Warner shareholders for a number of reasons that I think are very, very important to explore. But also, people need to look beyond what is being said in the mainstream media and the actions of a company that is definitely not terrible or the death of cinema, but is doing a lot to preserve it. We've made regulatory moves in France, Italy, India, South America, cleaning up the balance sheet, deepening events and awards, live strategy. So this deal has been taking place for some time. It's not fly by night. We need Wall Street to look at it, to get on board, to see that Netflix is primed for this. They're ready to do it. They are serious, and that ultimately winning this with a $72 billion offer and a breakup fee to reassure regulators. Netflix is, I believe, going to win the Hollywood. And from Paramount Sky with their "this is an unfair and tilted process" is just, it's childish, it's ridiculous. But the unfair process was the propaganda that he's been doing. I believe if there was ever any kind of credible investigation done between him and Elon Musk, which is never going to happen, you would see that they were literally bringing down the price of a competitor. Fair and unethical tactics in order to acquire something and detract from what Netflix was doing, simply so that they could have a bigger piece of the pie. So this is what I've been saying all along, and where I've been putting my money. I do believe Netflix is the end game here, and that people say, oh, who could have predicted that Netflix buying Warner Brothers? That's the point. You can predict it. You are actually watching the behaviors unfold in a way that I think is going to be an epic film or series one day when it's made about how this all took place, and definitely worth exploring in multiple episodes. And I'm really not a big, I don't have a influential presence, very, very new to doing videos. This isn't polished, but I can assure you my analysis is solid. My sources are solid. And I think that you'll be excited part 2, part 3, and then also just my predictions for Golden Globes and what we can expect to see there. So thank you very much. And I'm sorry for going a little long. And hopefully this was interesting to you and you'll tune in for where I believe the future for Warner and Netflix could be heading and why it would be a good idea to look at that as a long-term investment. Have a great day. Thank you.